Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to episode number 119 of Circle of Fellows. I am Shel Holtz. I'm Senior Director of Communications at Webcor, a commercial general contractor that operates in California and is headquartered in San Francisco. And I'm in the San Francisco East Bay today. And it is my pleasure to welcome the panel for our conversation about communication and sustainability. Terrific panel today. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in just a second. But first, I want to let those of you who are watching in real time, and thank you for that. I can see that you're there. That if you have a question, a comment, an observation, we invite you to join this conversation. There is the ability to pose your question or your remark right there through YouTube Live. And I am able to show those on the screen, and we'll digress from whatever we're talking about and address your topic. So hope you'll take advantage of that. So with that out of the way, Martha, let's start with you.
Hi there, my name is Martha Mazechka, and I live in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, the far east of Canada. My work encompasses a number of issues, primarily in communication, strategic planning, and public policy research. So I've seen the issue of sustainability from both a community-led perspective as well as a corporate one, and I'm really excited about today's topic.
Me too. Thanks, Martha. Bonnie, you're up.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Caver. I'm in Austin, Texas. I run a company called Reputation Lighthouse, and we're focused on change management and reputation. So that sustainability falls right smack dab in the middle.
Great. Looking forward to your contributions, Bonnie. Bonnie is a member of the 2025 class of fellows, as is Brent, who we'll get to in a minute. But first, Zora, you're up next.
Hello, everyone. My name's Zora Artis. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia, and I run my own advisory and consultancy firm called Artis Advisory, as well as the Alignment People. And my work is in alignment, brand and communications, and sustainability does certainly come up quite often.
Great. And we appreciate your getting up really early to join us. If my calculations are right, it's just a little after 6 a.m. for you.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And Brent, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brent Carey. I'm based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'm the Vice President of Communications at Mattamy Asset Management, which is the parent company of Mattamy Homes, which is North America's largest family-owned home builder. And we've adopted sustainability as a core value and are attempting to lead the industry, pull it along into a more sustainable future. So it's a topic near and dear to all our hearts at Mattamy.
Great. And now that we have introductions out of the way, let's jump into our conversation. And Brent, you shared a Harvard Business Review article from earlier this year. I had missed it, and I'm grateful that you forwarded that. It was a good article. I want to quote about 2 paragraphs from this article to kick off our conversation. They write that companies need a transparent sustainability communication strategy that's positive without being Pollyannish, clear without being catastrophic, and committed without provoking unwarranted backlash. This requires deep strategic consideration of messages, language, and content formats. To do this, leaders need to implement 3 strategies. 1, understand and address the expectations of your employees and customers. 2, connect emotionally with your audience using stories and facts to support your messages. And 3, move beyond the traditional sustainability report. That's a lot to talk about right there. And Brent, since you shared that, I thought I'd throw it to you first. What jumped out at you about all of this?
Yeah, thanks, Shel. And I think what resonated with me in that article was, there's a lot of external pressures on companies to retreat from, pull back from their sustainability commitments. But 2 very, very important audiences cannot be forgotten in this. Customers, employees. Customers are still out there looking for sustainable products, sustainable companies. Our research has shown that more and more they're willing to pay for it. And so it's a topic that's still of interest to them, regardless of the socio or political winds that are blowing. And perhaps even more important and sort of really dear to my heart is the employee audience. We know that employees are looking for companies to join or stay with that share their values, and increasingly, especially with the younger generation, that is includes the topic of sustainability. So that when the article sort of made those couple of points about those audiences, that's what really resonated for me. So within our organization and others I'm familiar with, the commitment to sustainability needs to supersede what's going on in the external world, and that's sort of the general sentiment that spoke to me from that article.
Other thoughts on what the article posited?
I think it's interesting to hear that coming from, being in Harvard Business Review, which of course is global, but, the situation or the context that it's referencing is a lot of the polarization that's happening in the US. And I was listening to another conversation about the context in the US and what companies are needing to do to get through this period of time. And they were saying pretty much that they're going to do whatever they need to do to appease who they need to appease to get through the next few, however many years it's going to take. So does that then mean that they stay quiet and don't talk about sustainability because it could be frowned on and there could be negative consequences? So they've got this juxtaposition happening where we know that sustainability in all senses of the word is actually really quite important and needs to not be a performative gesture, but really embedded in the DNA of the organisation, as was being spoken about before, and it needs to be part of how people do the work. And the communication in itself is about really being very transparent and accountable, but it's also about how you connect it to the work that you're doing in the everyday. How are you sharing the right stories? How are you ensuring that you're being transparent, you're being accountable, but you're also being true to who you are, because that shows through. And, whether it's a younger generation coming into the workforce where they're looking at is there values alignment for them, or whether it's consumers and potentially the risk of, say, green hushing, for example, we run the risk of eroding trust, and that then becomes a huge reputational issue for a company or an organisation to try and get over, and communication professionals are in the centre of that, so they need to be the bridge builders in some way.
It's a really good point, Zora, because I think also in the same way that Brent talked about employees as being a key audience, we can't forget that employees are also part of the community. They have neighborhoods, they live in cities and towns that may be directly affected by the practices or lack thereof of their employer with respect to sustainability, and not just from an environmental perspective, but also from the social and the economic impacts. And so when we think about sustainability, environment comes first and foremost, but looking at how people, what they bring to their workplace can't be forgotten because it's part of the values. And when we talk about the values, how do people live those values if sustainability is not clearly articulated by leadership or even in the mission, vision, and values of a company? And so I'm always curious to look at, do we just look at people as wearing an employee hat, or do we also recognize that they have a whole self that may not necessarily come through the front door of the workplace? And that this sometimes can be a very difficult place to manage when they bridge their own accountability to their friends and neighbors in community who may be affected either positively or negatively, but often negatively when it comes to lack of action on the sustainability front.
I think we're also seeing in the United States a doubling down on sustainability. And even though, we have this kind of reputation right now that it's not the thing to do, it's the checking of the box that is not the thing to do. Those organizations that aligned and believed in sustainability have doubled down on it. They're really looking at how they move forward as sustainable organizations. And it really goes back to things that all of you have said is, what's that strategic alignment? Are you listening to your community? Is it part of your mission, vision, values? If it's part of your organization, you're doubling down on it and you're trying to make it part of something that's very successful. If it was just a checkbox because somebody twisted your arm or you had to do it and you never made it part of your DNA, then yes, those organizations are not doing it. But in the long run, the organizations that will rise and will benefit for long-term sustainability are those that have done it right from the beginning and have aligned strategically around it.
I just bookmarked an article. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it's from the Wharton School. And the headline is, "When Does Corporate Silence Backfire?" So, I mean, that's a broader conversation, but certainly something organizations need to consider. I think that the knee-jerk reaction of saying we can't talk about this anymore really needs to be dug into and considered, and scenario planning done to determine what the risk is of not saying something. But you raised an interesting point. I think it was Zora that you brought this up. There's more to sustainability than climate. And climate is certainly top of mind right now. It's 101 degrees Fahrenheit outside right now. There has been blistering heat across the U.S. This summer. There's more to come. There are more intense hurricanes and storms. There's flooding, the likes of which we haven't seen. I mean, we've seen big floods, but not so many of them in such a concentrated period of time. So climate is top of mind. I even saw an article about coolcations being back in fashion. So you got to go someplace where it's cool. They're running out of those places. Although, Martha, it sounds like I could get some of that where you are right now.
Well, it's pretty normal for us. Last week was not normal with 36 Celsius. But yeah, people are starting to see on a more global level the actual physical impacts on the earth of climate change. And I think we're telling that story pretty well in some respects, but we're not telling the story about the other components of sustainability when it comes to economic benefits and community benefits that sustainability offers. We sometimes hear the concern about cost. It's going to cost us more to do this, or if we change our light bulbs one way, we're going to cause delays in production. So I think we need to have those bigger conversations against the backdrop of the urgency that we're seeing in all our countries.
It's like sustainability, as we said, it's much more than climate. It's definitely about balancing people, planet, and financial resilience in an organisation. So, we miss so much if we're just talking about the environment. We're much, much broader than that. You've got employee well-being in there. You've got, partnerships with First Nations communities, ethical supply chains, a whole range of different things. So if we're looking at those three as a triangle, it's not really balanced. Everything's not really equal in the triangle at any point in time. So it's about looking at how do you balance, how do you try and work out which one's going to be the one that you're focusing on at any point in time strategically as an organisation, or whether you're working on something in the project. And so you have to look at things holistically and not just focus on one aspect, because one impacts the other. I was having a conversation recently with a colleague who works in the manufacturing sector in recycling, And, everything that they do, they look at from, a people perspective, a financial perspective, and a environmental perspective. And they look at how it impacts everything within the organisation, within the community, with their customers. So they're constantly looking at the three things together. And if you don't, you miss a big part of the picture. So it's really important to look at it holistically, I think.
Yeah, in some ways, I think we may have lost a little something when we, evolved the terminology even, right? Started with corporate social responsibility, then moved into ESG, which covered all of the aspects. And then with the move now to sustainability as the umbrella term, I think maybe too often people equate sustainability with environment, and our job as communicators is to not lose sight of the other factors which have all been mentioned, community involvement and governance within your organizations, responsible management, things like that. So yeah, definitely need to take the holistic picture and not be hemmed in by the terminology.
Yeah, ESG has a branding problem.
Yes, it does. It does. People don't understand what ESG means either. When you say environment, social and governance, they're like, okay, particularly the G word, what does that mean? But ESG and sustainability aren't necessarily the same, equal either. So there is a language issue. There is no common language. When back in 2022 at the World Conference in New York, we had a whole afternoon session that looked at climate change, Catalyst for Climate it was called. And if anyone's an IBC member, they can look up Catalyst for Climate on the Catalyst publication or library, and they'll find a whole series of articles about the work that we did. And one of the biggest issues was the lack of a common language. Even things like, net zero or carbon neutral mean different things in different countries, and the same sort of thing applies to sustainability more broadly. So it risks creating confusion, it risks spreading misinformation, and of course, loss of trust as well. Even terms like recycled means something different in the US to what it means here. So a lot of the things that are on packaging in the US would never be acceptable here in Australia, for example. And when an Australian is looking at packaging over there, if they're familiar or in that space, they shake their head at what's actually put on packages from a marketing perspective. So there's a lot of greenwashing happening through the marketing and communications that is actually happening in the market that people might not be aware of. So it's potentially creating trust issues as well.
I think people are aware to a certain extent, Zora, because I remember when the first sort of green products came on the market, I dutifully went and purchased green dishwashing cubes, and it came in a box, and inside the box were 3 bags, and inside those bags were individually wrapped cubes of dishwashing powder. And I just kind of looked at this whole mass of packaging I was ending up with, and the only thing I could actually recycle was the cardboard box, because everything else was not recyclable plastic. And so I think people start looking at the products they're buying with more skepticism and saying, okay, if it's not plastic, then I can do cardboard. And if it's not cardboard, can I purchase it and bring my own containers? So there's a lot of individual action. And I think that a lot of the work we've seen over the last few years with respect to the environmental impact, looking at community impact, and even the small business sector as sources for suppliers and that part of the circular economy, a lot of that has been individually focused. And now people are saying, okay, I need to know what the company is doing. And if the company is not forthcoming, or people think it's like, the pink washing when we saw all the pink ribbons for breast cancer on products, we're dealing with, on one hand, a very sophisticated audience who are being very picky about what they want to buy and are using their dollars to speak. And then we have that confusion. about the lack of common language. And I was really interested to learn that there is an ISO number 14001 in particular that is a standard around environmental sustainability that's certified by a third party. So I'm really interested to learn how widespread that is actually happening in terms of people, companies applying for and seeking to get their work in this area assessed by that standard.
I wonder how the labeling that I saw just the other day, which was from the US, in stores, was talking about the number of trees saved, all sorts of things, which were just not possible in that case to be true. So I agree with you that there are a lot of people in the community who are much more conscious and much more aware, but I don't think it's a broad brush way of looking at the community, because people are very, what they say they're going to do versus what they're going to buy is not necessarily the same thing either. And that's been an issue for quite a long time when it comes to the environment, whether people are prepared to pay much more for it. In reality, they might not be.
One of the issues on the flip side of all of this is organizations that are creating genuinely sustainable products with minimal packaging and touting that, but the product's not very good. I have given a try to 2 different brands of laundry sheets. They come in basically envelopes. All you have to toss is the envelope, which is recyclable. The laundry sheet goes into the washing machine and gets dissolved, which is great. Unfortunately, my clothes don't get clean. And I saw a Wirecutter article in the New York Times about laundry detergents, and their verdict on sheets was they don't work. They're great for the environment, but they don't work. And they recommended actually Tide liquid, which with a big plastic container that you have to toss. So what do we tell our organizations if they're planning to introduce a product in order to tout its sustainability characteristics, but it's an inferior product?
Well, they should be looking at the quality of the product as well. But, how much influence does the communication professional have on that? I have one of my past clients is in the wine industry, global wine industry, quite a good foothold in the US, and sustainability is core to everything they do. And so when they're talking about sustainability, they are looking at how it impacts the quality of the product as well as how it impacts the brand itself. And it's just woven into everything they do. And the sustainability strategy was actually owned by the communication function. So it became central to everything the comms department was doing, but as well as the rest of the business itself. So, they looked at everything about investing in water efficiency, renewable energy, regenerative agriculture, and how that impacts the grapes. What's going on with the bottles, and telling the stories as well within the business, but also externally as well, because it was a really important part of everything they did. So they just wove it into just the way they do things.
Foundationally, and I was just going to say foundationally to reputation, if your products and services don't work, you can't start working on your reputation. So that's foundational to everything you do. So starting with building a reputation for other things versus your products and services is just going to eventually, you'll fail.
Well, and in that scenario, you're going to be, it's going to be counterproductive too, right? If it's not a quality product, it serves to taint the rest of your claims and like, even others in the same industry, perhaps, right? If it's not a product that's going to work, then what is the point in perhaps paying more for it or or what have you. So yeah.
Yeah, we have a product recommendation from a viewer. Our fellow Alice Brink says she uses Hey Sunday laundry sheets and they work for me. Not a brand I was familiar with, Alice. I will give that a try. I certainly liked the packaging that I got with those sheets. Just wanted them to work. Right now, according to the most recent data I have seen, 70% roughly of white collar employees are using artificial intelligence on the job every day. We hear quite a bit actually about the sustainability challenges with AI, how much electricity and water are required for the inference in AI. And it seems like there is a contradictory message for organizations that are encouraging the use of AI while touting their sustainability practices. We're not going to stop using AI. It's just not going to happen. So what do we do about this?
It is very difficult to talk about you're throwing away, you've got all your recycles of your coffee cup and you're talking about that, but yet you're also touting that you're going to be AI first. It's a messy time of when organizations are trying to figure that out. There's a lot of push to do some sustainability around AI, and how do we recycle water? How do we use some sustainable products, sustainable energy? I think our fellow session at World Conference, Mike Klein suggested we have data centers in Iceland with geothermal. But reality is we are looking, and companies are looking at how they can make it more efficient. But then I'm also seeing companies that are saying, scale back what you're using it for. Stop playing around. Be a little more efficient in what you're doing. Be more efficient in learning your prompts. So there's kind of two sides to it, but it's a messy period right now. And it is one of those that we have to be transparent as communicators to talk about that. We can't just say, we're moving the needle sustainably, without also addressing the fact that AI is impacting that.
And I don't think those two things need to be mutually exclusive either, right? Like AI has the potential to contribute to sustainability performance and make a difference there. So maybe there's a story to be told. For example, we're starting to experiment with modular housing and building wall panels and things of that nature in a super automated AI powered factory where waste can be minimized because of the introduction or the application of AI to the process. So I think there's maybe some opportunity to show how AI can contribute to sustainability goals as well.
Interesting you raised that, Brent, because I'm about halfway through a podcast interview with Demis Hassabis. It's a 2.5-hour interview. He's the co-founder and I think he's the CEO of Google DeepMind. He won a Nobel Prize for the AlphaFold AI tool that solved the folding of proteins. And he thinks that AI is going to help solve the energy problem. That it's going to come up with some novel solutions at some point that will address this. So I mean, he's a very optimistic guy. I hope he's right. But I don't know if there's any other thoughts on the AI component of this.
I think it's a paradox because you've got companies adopting AI to drive efficiency and cut costs, but at the same time, it's adding to huge energy demand, and so are they, when you're looking at that triangle of people, planet, and economic benefit, are we looking at the advantage that it's giving to the organization economically, because it's also impacting the people side of the equation, of course, isn't it? So I think Bonnie's point about the transparency is really important. And then, how are organizations genuinely then contributing to using renewable energy, and how are they talking about that? It's interesting. Just today, I saw a post from Neil Hoyne, who's the chief strategist at Google, and he said that for the first time, Google's sharing data on energy and water consumption for every Gemini prompt, and they had MIT Technology do a review, which you can find online. But what was interesting about that is that they're going out and being transparent about this particular part, which I think is important, because otherwise, if you're staying quiet, then to me, it's again a reputational risk, and it's no different to greenwashing as well, or green hushing either.
Alice shares that the companies using AI aren't the ones generating the data center emissions, which is part of the disconnect. And I think that's an excellent point, actually. When people at my organization use AI, it's going through Microsoft or OpenAI or Google, and it's the work that's happening on their end that's producing the emissions. So the employee coming up with that prompt isn't thinking that this produces emissions. That's what Google's doing. Seems to me that might be an opportunity for some of the storytelling that the Harvard Business Review article suggested is important for connecting emotionally with your audience with stories and facts. And Brent, you like the idea of employees being at the heart of those stories.
100%, Shell. It's an approach we've taken where try to move beyond the abstract of carbon accounting and tons of carbon equivalent, all those measures, which are important, but they don't really resonate with people. So stories are what get you beyond the abstract, and we've put our employees as sort of the heroes of those stories front and center as when we share what we're doing, what the initiatives are, what the impact is. Our employees are always always front and center in that, and it enables us to talk about sustainability in a way that resonates and is real for both our employees and external audiences as well.
When you're talking about responsible AI, I mean, that's what whole responsible AI is, right? There's a lot of elements to it. And one of them is education and transparency, so that you are communicating and with organization, with your employees, you're empowering your employees, you're talking with your stakeholders. It really is about giving them the knowledge that they have and fighting misinformation and disinformation around it. So responsible AI is a whole different way of thinking about it, and it goes into the education processes, which is important to sustainability.
It's a really great point, Bonnie, because I think there's that whole conversation also about ethics. If you're not paying for that water usage or that energy usage down the line so that it's not appearing as a negative on your balance sheet, do you have any ownership? Do you feel any ownership? If we don't have those conversations about ethical use of our different practices to generate ideas. I mean, I worked with a group and they were asked to come up with ideas on how they could become more sustainable. And the conversation was really fruitful. And when they implemented some of those ideas and they followed up on the results, they could demonstrate how the process of generating ideas that would contribute to sustainable development and being able to see the impact inside the company, that it wasn't something that happened down the line and therefore it didn't affect them. And for people to get their ideas profiled and highlighted meant that more people thought, well, I have this great idea, now I can do it. And so sharing those stories from employees, it's not like a think tank approach or, someone up on the mountaintop comes out with this great idea. But I think the ethical component of what do I do, even if I don't see the impact inside my company, are there any consequences down the line? that actually I need to take ownership of, and therefore start taking those steps to make positive change.
We built this whole responsible AI implementation compass, which is around change management. And the first piece of it is visioning. And it's really about visioning and aligning your brand to what you want to be as an AI-enabled organization and what comes into that very often. And then we look at organizational readiness. And we're doing that long before we're talking about the tools that we're going to implement or whether we're going to build by. We're talking about what I want my organization to be like as an AI-enabled company. And so environmental impact, energy, alignment to the brand, alignment to the things that we feel are, that the organization feels are important, all come into play in that visioning, but also the opportunity of how do we solve some problems. So what if you're an energy organization, a utility company, how are you working to solve some of these problems with AI and utilizing it as a partner to do that? So it's a little different way of thinking about AI, i.e. just jumping to the tools. It's looking at envisioning what your competitive advantage would look like. And sustainability comes into that very much so.
I think that there's also an opportunity to get very specific on the tools in our messaging, particularly with employees. I know one of the things that I do all the time, and it drives me crazy, is I'll be working with one of the LLMs, and I have a task that requires me to use a reasoning model. And so I use the little pull down, I choose the reasoning model, it does its thing, then I go away and I come back 2 hours later and I just need a simple answer to a question, and it doesn't occur to me to change that, right? So I ask a simple question and it says, starting to think. And I'm going, oh God, how much energy am I using for it to do what it could have done on the much lighter and faster model? So just messaging to people, be sure to check which model is selected before you begin your query. So that you don't waste energy where it's not necessary. I mean, if you have to do something that requires reasoning, sure, go ahead. But, you know, if you're just looking for an answer to a question, be sure to switch it back.
It strikes me as this is similar to recycling, for example, the education that's had to happen around that. In Australia, we have it differs by municipality and different from state to state, but there's been a lot of education around the importance of recycling and how everything that any individual does, any household does, any business does is really important and has an impact on the environment and what's done. So, you know, we have in Melbourne, for example, here where I live, we have 4 different bins. And so we've got one for recycling glass, one for recycling paper, one for organics and food, and another bin as well for the greens as well. So you've got all these different bins. They're all collected at curbside. We are very aware that we shouldn't be contaminating any of the stuff that's in the bins, the way it's done. So, for example, if you're recycling your paper, you don't go and put it in a plastic bag inside in that bin because that contaminates it. We wash the jars, the bottles before we put them in, so we're avoiding contaminating those as well. So there's actions that can be done, and all of that's been done through education, and it's a lot of effort. If you're in Japan, for example, you won't see a rubbish bin or in the streets because people take their rubbish away with them and they dispose of it thoughtfully. So there's education that has to be done, and it can be done, but it takes a lot of effort, and it differs all around the world. But it's really up to each government, each organisation, how they put that into place. We also can take cans and bottles and put them into large containers, and we get cash back for it. You know, so there's all sorts of incentives that can be put in place. So it strikes me as something that could be similar with AI that could be done.
Yeah, I'd like to return to the conversation about going beyond climate when talking about sustainability. And I'm wondering, how do we tell stories that draw people's attention to the other dimensions of sustainability? How do we, as communicators, get that message out that these are elements that are important, these are things we're doing, these are the impacts that they'll have? Is that the message that we want to convey?
I remember reading a story. Now, it was pre-pandemic, so forgive me, I can't remember the name of the company. They weren't one of the big coffee companies in the US, but it was a smaller independent type business. And their sustainability report focused on the relationships they built with small scale farmers that produced coffee, and why they were trying to build those smaller scale initiatives that had a lower environmental impact, but also it provided people with income, and that there was this contribution to the local economy rather than relying on big factory farms. And so the fact that I remember that they did that story is important, because it made me think about what are the things that companies can do when they look at their supply chain. What are the things they can highlight when they work with their employees, thinking about how they are connected to their communities. And it can be their geographic community, it can also be their community of identity, so that we see that synergy. Because I think that we haven't seen the plank. We look at reduce, reuse, recycle as a triangle or a circle of three. I think the point about environmental, social, and economic as a triangle, I'd like to see it as a circle, because I think that there are contributions that feed into each of those categories that have an impact on the others. And so seeking out those stories, because who doesn't like a good story, also demonstrates the impact more effectively, rather than saying we bought 20,000 tons from 2,000 suppliers and we saved or contributed X number of dollars. People remember the stories, as opposed to, if the numbers aren't given with a story behind it, it's just numbers.
A friend of mine that I know whose background was in IT, she's of South Asian heritage here in Australia. She wanted to have an impact in a sustainable way. So she created a company called Pune, which is all about supporting women in India and giving them an opportunity to create and have an economic source of income, and something that they are proud of producing. So they recycle yarn and use this yarn to create beautiful woven hand towels and like throw rugs and that sort of stuff. And she tells the story of that incredibly well. And she's started it from scratch. It's been going for a number of years. And, she's been recognized for carrying a message of ethical responsibility and environmental stewardship, and also supporting women in India to have their own opportunity for, to get out of poverty. So she's tying it directly to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and she talks about each one and how it all contributes. It's beautifully done. She does it really, really well. And that's a very small business that's making an impact.
Great case study. We have a comment, or actually a question. This is from our friend Mirko Petrocevic. I believe he's in Philly. I may have that wrong. But he says, moving away from climate change, consumer products, and AI, is our global information ecosystem sustainable? Can we continue on a rising, polarizing, and disinformation spreading trajectory? I was wrong. He says Waterloo, Ontario. So there you go. But back to that question. It's a very good question, and one that I had not put into the sustainability bucket.
It's really, for me, is where the Global Alliance has come down with responsible communication. And we looked as the Global Alliance, which, if you're not familiar with the Global Alliance, it's the federation of all communication and PR associations around the world. So if you're a member of IABC is a member of the Global Alliance. And so the Global Alliance put forth a proposal to the United Nations of the 18th sustainable goal. And that really, and they're not adding an 18th sustainable goal, but the point of that was that responsible communication is very important to all of the other 17 goals. And if you don't put communication in the process, if it's not intricate in the process, and if you don't fight misinformation and disinformation, we'll never be able to move forward with sustainability entirely. And that goes to your question about storylines and the narrative. But it also is about how are we set up to fight this misinformation and disinformation. And as communication professionals, we have a tendency to fight that for our own brands, in protection of our own brands, but we're not necessarily standing up and being transparent about that. And with AI, we're going to have to do that. We're going to have to fight back and say that these deep fakes are not right, that this information is not right, and it's a totally different reputational piece than we've done as communication professionals in a long time. But fighting this misinformation and disinformation is going to be one of the top parts of our job.
Yeah, I just this morning or yesterday, I saw a notice. I don't remember where I saw it, but it was about being aware of the deep fakes and the AI generated videos being produced around the hurricane that's now affecting the East Coast. And so this is creating some genuine risk if people pay attention to this and take action based on the made up information that's being produced and shared.
Yesterday I saw it. I'm from North Carolina, so I'm watching it. And Outer Banks is one of my favorite places, so I'm watching it every single day. And yesterday there was this road, it's a main road, and they're saying, we've evacuated everybody, and this big wave coming over on top of they've got a camera, a big wave coming over on top of the road. And I'm like, oh my, and I thought the wave was a little too perfect. And then a great white whale came out in it. So that's kind of the funny thing with AI, right? Oh, that's funny. But there's so many pieces of misinformation. You don't have to evacuate. You do have to evacuate. We're doing this. We've not done this. In disasters, it is a major challenge. It was a major challenge here in Texas when we had the floods around July 4th. And as organizations, we have to push back. We have to educate, and it's part of this sustainability piece. If we're not telling the stories of what's really happening and fighting the disinformation and misinformation, we can't move forward. And it's eroding the trust when we are trying to do the right things.
Mirko, just to share his follow-up comment, what might communicators do to enhance the sustainability of our information ecosystem? And Bonnie, you addressed some of that with the Global Alliance initiative. Anything else leap to mind about what we can do, either as a community of communicators or as communicators working for our individual employers and clients?
I'm working with 4 things, and I know everybody else has something too, but we're looking at anticipating risks, doing these reputational risk assessments, mapping them, equipping leaders for this, coaching our executives to speak credibly and clearly and tell those narrative stories, measure and report, which we do as a profession, but back to that listening and adapting. We have to constantly be adapting to and adjusting to the narratives that are out there. And that requires a great deal of listening.
Yeah, Shell, the two words that come to mind for me are transparency and courage.
Oh, yes, to courage, which is hard, right?
Very hard. Yeah, it can be hard in the face of, as we started out this conversation, in the face of political headwinds, for example, that might not sort of be in line with your core values. You've got to be courageous and find a way to stay true to your organizational values and your personal values as individual communicators.
I think also to support critical thinking, because there's a ton of information. It doesn't matter what you look at, your laptop, your television, your telephone, your cell phone. We're being bombarded with lots of messages. And it becomes very easy to have that stuff just wash over us. And I think that we need to say to people, yeah, okay, it might be funny or it looks real, but let's bring some healthy skepticism. Do we really know that is the CEO speaking? Do we really know that message that came by email was something that was generated by the company? How do we communicate that to people? And I'm seeing more organizations, not just within their own employees, but also to their publics, their consumers, their stakeholders, to say, yes, we know that you're getting subjected to a lot of deep fakes and spams and robocalls, etc. Here are the ways that you can trust the information you get from us. If you want to check, you want to question, you want to query, here's how you can be sure that the information that you're seeing about us is true, and where does it come from?
The other word that we've not mentioned that I think is fundamental is ethics. So ultimately, we're bound at IABC by a code of ethics, but we need to look at it more from a profession perspective to make sure that what is actually that we're holding each other to account. And as Brent said, that actually does take courage, because as much as it's black and white for some of us, it's grey for others, and that's a problem.
I'm gonna brag for a minute, and there's a reason for this, and I'll share that when I'm done with the brag. I work for a commercial general contractor, and we were awarded the very first true zero waste certification for a commercial structure worldwide for a 3-building scientific facility that we built in pretty close to the San Francisco International Airport. We were also awarded the world's first true certification for a government building, a public building. This is for the Contra Costa County Administration building. That was a difficult one because there was a demolition of 2 existing buildings involved, and yet we diverted all of that from landfills and incinerators, using a lot of the material from the demolished buildings in the foundation of the new one. And we just recently were awarded for a building that we did in San Francisco, I can't remember if it's the world's first or the country's first carbon neutral building. It will operate carbon neutral. So this is all great, and we make hay out of this because why wouldn't we? Why isn't this greenwashing? I think we've gotten so accustomed to talking about greenwashing that anybody touting what they're actually doing is automatically painted with that brush.
It goes back to that actual delivering on the words. And we've been so bad at delivering on the words that people don't trust the words. So we just go forward at the beginning just to distrust. So you need proof points like the awards. But then even then they say, is that a pay to play kind of thing? So we move forward with mistrust because we've done things. So we've been so misaligned with talking without backing it up with truth.
Yeah.
It's funny, for us, if you're, I was just going to say, in Australia, you'd be shouting it from the rooftops, and you'd be encouraged to.
Yeah. Fortunately for us,
it would be expected.
Yeah. The true certification is from the U.S. Green Building Council, so I don't think anybody would say that's pay for play, but it's just a knee-jerk reaction. We're down to about our last 5 minutes, so I'd like to go around real quickly and get your top line view on what you think communicators should be doing next on this front. And let's see, let's start with you, Brent. We'll go backwards from our introductions.
Sure. I think just to I'm sort of processing a lot of what has my colleagues here have been talking about. I think it's critically important to one, stay on top of trends, and two, to speak the truth. And I'll go back to my word courage in the face of what might be happening. It does take courage to stay true to your values, but those organizations that do stay true to their values, and hopefully or ideally sustainability is one of those, there's opportunity, not just sort of reputational, but to demonstrate from maybe an industry perspective that you can run a sustainable for-profit business, for example, and those things can mesh together. So there's lots of opportunity here, and we should be courageous about seizing that opportunity, I think.
Thank you. Zora?
I agree with what Brent said. So I'm thinking we can't sit at the edge of the conversation. We need to pretty much be there leading on transparency, helping embed sustainability into business as usual, and connect across cultural and the regulatory divides that exist, because we need to make sure that we're safeguarding trust and reputation, as well as telling the stories of the impact.
Bonnie?
I say authentic and responsible communication, and that really feeds into stopping using buzzwords that have become woke or meaningless. How are we really telling those stories? And then the final thing is do your reputational risk assessments, and do them often, so that you know where those dark spots are and where you're going to be hit, so that you can guide your leaders.
And Martha?
I think it really is about the courage and ethics for me to be able to open those conversations with your employees and also with your communities, your constituencies, your stakeholders, because people want to see you do what you say rather than just pretend to say it or to put up a poster. The trust issues that we've seen over the last few years have been significant, and we need to be rebuilding that, because they won't listen to our stories if they don't trust us.
Seems to me that there's, from the employee's perspective, an engagement issue here as well, because if there's a say-do gap between what leadership is saying and what they're doing around this, then employees' engagement is likely to erode.
Absolutely.
Engage for Success in the UK lists integrity, which they say is no say-do gap, that leaders do what they say they will do, as one of the 4 enablers of employee engagement. So if you take that to heart, that matters. Want to let everybody know about the next episode of Circle of Fellows. Episode 120 is scheduled for 10 a.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, September 18th. The topic is hybrid communications and workplaces. That ought to be a lively conversation that I will not be participating in. I have a conflict, so Brad Whitworth will be sitting in as the moderator for episode 120. And the panel, as of now, Anna is quick to point out, is Priya Bates, Andrea Greenhouse, and Ritzi Ronquillo. So she's still working on identifying a 4th for this panel, but that sounds like it should be a pretty robust discussion. I want to thank everybody for your participation today. This has been a great conversation, and I always want to thank Anna Willie for her behind-the-scenes work in handling all of the logistics that make these Circle of Fellows happen. One of these days we'll get her on camera, but incredibly grateful that she takes care of all of this for us. So until next month, thanks everybody. It was great to see you all.
Thank you.
See you
Bye-bye.
later. Bye.